Today I want to review The Courage to be Disliked by Ichiro Kishimi and Fumitake Koga. I finished this book a few days back and I think it was so nice. It gave me so many new perspectives on a bunch of different things and I made so many notes about everything that I thought was really wonderful about the book. And yes, this is my attempt at a book review. So let's get into it. Why did I enjoy the book? The first thing was that the dialogue used throughout the book was really fresh. I loved how it's not one of those traditional like philosophy books, even though they definitely have their own charm. It's not one of those traditional philosophy books where it's just the philosopher like writing down this, and this is what you should do, and this is what I've learned, and this is my philosophy. It's written in the form of a dialogue between a youth and a philosopher, and I think it's a really different way of expressing philosophical ideas and getting a reader to understand the Alderian philosophy, which is what the book is based on. So I think that aspect really engaged me a lot because I have always been more appealed by fantasy fiction and just like the kind of narrative voice used in those books is very different from the ones that a philosopher would take up when they're trying to explain something. The second reason why I really like the book, something that stood out to me, is that because of the style in which it's written, where it's just like philosopher and then youth, because of that style in which the book is written, it's so easy for readers to be able to put themselves in the shoes of the youth. The book gives us a really good opportunity to vicariously be in the debate through the youth, which I think is perfect because the youth is sort of in the same situation as us, right? The youth is this young adult and he has all these preconceived notions about the world, like a lot of us do. And the debate is based on the fact that the youth is trying to prove the philosopher wrong, and the philosopher is trying to explain the Alderian philosophy to the youth and get him to understand. So throughout the book, the youth is coming up with different scenarios where he challenges the philosopher and says that, oh, I don't think this particular scenario that my friend is dealing with or that I'm dealing with or that I've heard of can be fixed or can be related to your philosophy. And then the philosopher is like, oh, actually, and then he explains his philosophy. So, it's like we're very much learning along with the youth, which I think is a great way of introducing new concepts to people in the book. The third reason why I really liked the book is that a lot of good examples were given at different times when there was a particular idea that the philosopher was trying to explain. The fourth thing I would say about why I like the book is that it introduces a lot of thoughts that would be like extremely radical to the average person because it's a very different way of thinking. But despite this, the book is also not too long. It's written in a digestible way, which, makes these concepts easy for a reader to understand. And there are so many examples which make it overall, yeah, like I said, just way more digestible. The fifth thing I would say is that the book had great vocabulary. I think it was really simple and effective in its language when it needed to be. But at the same time, it also like sprinkled a few scientific um, words here and there. And right after that, explained them in depth, which I think is great because you're not just, throwing these words at the reader. You're explaining something, you're connecting it to, the science behind Alderian philosophy and psychology, and then you're moving forward with just a reader who has learned something overall. Okay, next I will talk about the criticisms I have about the book. I think the book didn't fully convince me about a few things. Even though the book being really short works in its favor many times, a few things also deserve to be dwelt upon for a little longer because I think for the reader to fully be convinced, that topic will have to be discussed more, backed up by more examples. Because yes, I, caught myself not being that convinced at a few points. The second criticism that I have is some people who I spoke to about the book were really irked by the fact that it says that trauma doesn't exist. And honestly, that makes sense. I think a lot of people who've gone through stuff and they consider themselves like survivors of trauma would be very upset by something like that because trauma is a serious thing. You can't just say, oh, it doesn't exist after someone's been struggling with something for so long. Yeah, that is one thing about the book that I think maybe pushes some readers away. The book is very outright in how it says that trauma doesn't exist, the past doesn't exist. But at the same time, I would say that this might also be something that made the book appealing to me. So I think it's also about the reader who's looking into this stuff. I think when I see a book which is like, oh, trauma doesn't exist, and then I see that the book is trying to explain why, I would be pretty curious about why instead of just shunning the book right away. So I think the fact that the book says trauma doesn't exist also creates curiosity and draws some people in. So I guess it's a double-edged sword at the end of the day. Okay. Number three for criticisms about the book. One like specific example of what I couldn't wrap my head around was what the writers say about anger, because they say that anger is only a method of communication and it isn't an emotion, it's just a method of communication. And there is a very good example about that given in the book as well, which really convinced me. Um, and while I was reading the book and after I finished reading it, I paid very close attention to whenever I was getting angry or upset. Anger is something people use as a method of communication by which other people will submit to them and will just keep quiet and listen to them, or like be controlled by whoever's angry in that scenario, because you're angry, you're shouting more, you're being more dominating, and you're communicating in a more aggressive way, which will make people submit to you. And because of that understanding, I was able to take a step back every time I felt myself getting angry and think, okay, do I need to communicate with anger, or do I just want to be calm and relaxed about the situation and just accept the fact that whoever is making me angry, or whichever situation is making me angry, is not going to really change even if I communicate with anger. So yeah, every time I felt angry, I sort of took a step back and evaluated that and realized that I don't need to feel angry, and it really helped me understand anger more. But I would also say that despite how it's helped me control anger and understand anger, even that's been directed towards me by others, I still wouldn't say that it's not an emotion at all. And I think the book might have been better at talking about anger if the philosopher would have explained to the youth why it's not an emotion. Like, yes, you gave an example of anger being used as a method of communication, but did you give a very concrete example of anger being like the complete opposite of an emotion? Because I think that would really convince readers, that would convince me, because I'm able to agree with them partly. It's like I don't 100% agree, but the 50% resonated with me a lot. The next thing I thought about when I was making notes for this review was, who is this book for? I feel like it's definitely for people who are open to reading about very drastically different thoughts. I think anyone who's interested in philosophy, of course, will be reading this. It's already a hugely popular book. I think the book has also been written in a very digestible way, which sort of opens it up to all age groups because it's simple, and at the same time, when they're not using simple language, they've explained what they mean by these scientific terms that they're throwing here and there. But also, I would definitely say that the book would be easier to implement for younger people, because I feel like most people know that universally an older person is more rigid in their thoughts and their actions, whereas young people who are probably in their late teens to mid 20s, I think the book would really appeal to them, because your late teens to mid 20s are so transformational, and if you consume information such as whatever's in The Courage to Be Disliked, it has the power to resonate so much. And young people, in that age group, in my opinion, also are more open to drastic change. But obviously, it depends on the type of person you are. There might be a very flexible, open minded, and knowledge hungry like 50-year-old who might read this book and be very inspired to make a change in like different aspects of their life. So I think, yeah, what I'm saying, obviously take it with a grain of salt. But as a 20-year-old, I think this is such a good time for me to have read the book. I really enjoyed it. Now I want to talk about the best parts of the book in my opinion. I have 22 different like things that the book touched upon, and we are definitely going to not talk about all 22. I'm going to just like pick and choose whatever I want to speak about from here. So the first one is etiology versus teleology, which I think it's a very interesting way that the book brought about the entire concept, because it said all of Freud's theories were very dependent on etiology because they spoke about trauma and they spoke about how people are affected by their past. And the book contrasts etiology with teleology and says that people actually have goals in their mind. And when you see stuff happening in your life, if you step back and say, what is the purpose of this? You will understand what that goal is. So if I have a crush on someone and I want to go up to them and tell them, but I get super, super shy every time and I just start blushing and I just can't go up to them, I will say, what is the purpose of all these symptoms that I'm getting where I get really nervous and I start blushing a lot? What is the purpose of these symptoms? So, what is my inner hidden subconscious goal? And that might be to not get rejected. So, I'm super scared of getting rejected and just having like that bad interaction, which is why I say that I'm too shy. You need to trace back from like all the symptoms that you're experiencing so that you get to your like subconscious inner goal, and then you need to change that goal. So I think teleology is something that really puts the power back in your hands, which I think is a good way of thinking if you want to make a change. Then the book talks about agathon and kakon. So agathon means beneficial and kakon means not beneficial. And these two Greek words are what you can trace back the English words of good and evil to. So the book says that when you trace it back, good just means beneficial, and when you trace evil back, it just means not beneficial. So at the end of the day, is something good or evil, or is it just subjectively beneficial or not beneficial? Because if people are looking only at the benefit, then that signifies no inherent evilness or nothing to do with wanting to create an adverse situation for someone. And the perspective that that brought in was that no one's actually evil, like no one's inherently evil. They just do what they see benefit in, and if they see benefit in something, it's not necessary that I should see benefit in it as well. They're just doing whatever's beneficial to them. Yeah, so this idea was really interesting to me because sometimes I think people, especially these days, I think polarization and with everything else going on, people get so caught up in what is good and evil and what's right and wrong. The words themselves, they weren't trying to say good or evil, they were just trying to say beneficial and not beneficial, which is interesting. Then the book talks about superiority and inferiority, and it talks about different conditions in terms of superiority and inferiority. And the four things that the book said was pursuit of superiority, feeling of inferiority, inferiority complex, and superiority complex. And it really broke down what all of these things mean. And it was so interesting to read about this because I think the words inferiority complex and superiority complex are thrown around so much, but understanding what it really means psychologically and scientifically was like very interesting to me. So the book said that pursuit of superiority is something that everyone's born with because people always have this innate want to pursue a superior state than what they're in right now. So if I'm making YouTube videos, I will be in the pursuit of superiority in the sense that I want to make my videos better. And that's something really healthy. That's something that most people have. The second thing, feeling of inferiority, it links to pursuit of superiority because you will pursue a superior state if you feel inferior right now. It's because you are comparing yourself to what you could be. It's similar to pursuit of superiority in the sense that you're not like happy with your current state, and that's why you have a feeling of inferiority which is pushing you to do better. Those two things are both situations in which you feel a certain way and the end goal is for you to strive to do better. And then the book talks about inferiority complex and superiority complex. So the moment the word complex comes in, that's when it's sort of not the best situation for you. And the book said that complex is a word that means there is an unnatural state of the mind that is muddled up with a lot of complex ideas and emotions. So, for inferiority complex, the philosopher tells the youth that people who have an inferiority complex are so overwhelmed with the feeling of inferiority that they completely stop trying to get better and they just allow themselves to be crushed by that feeling of inferiority, and they don't do anything about the feeling. They use the feeling as a sort of excuse to say, oh, I can't be better, like I can't make better YouTube videos because I'm just not good enough. I don't have the mental capacity to learn how to edit better, or I don't have the money to buy better cameras or better mics. This mic is so cheap. It's like 650 rupees, or a better mic. And I use that feeling of inferiority to just be an excuse for the fact that I'm not pursuing a higher state of being. Like I'm not trying to develop my skills. Then the worst one, in my opinion, is a superiority complex, where the book gives examples of how people with superiority complexes might do stuff like showing off about their links to other people who are in positions of power. And by linking themselves to a person of power, they're like borrowing their power a little bit, but they're not really doing anything to very concretely like improve themselves. It's like this situation where you don't like the feeling of inferiority and you feel small, but you also don't want to do anything concrete about it. So you try to manipulate people into thinking that you're superior without doing the actual work. Another very, very interesting thing that came up in this section was using misfortune as a way to one up people. I know a lot of people today that do this. It's like using your trauma to, make other people feel bad for you and to sort of control the narrative because you're making it about what you've gone through and about what your misfortunes are. And you are putting yourself in a superior position by saying, oh, I've gone through so much. And what the book says about that is, if you use misfortune to be in a superior position, you will always meet that misfortune, which is not the best situation. So yeah, I think what the book had to say about superiority and inferiority was very, very interesting to me. The book also said something very interesting about self-harm, which was, yeah, it seemed kind of controversial, but it said that self-harm is a type of revenge cry for help where you're doing something to get people to worry about you without directly asking for help. The next thing about the book that I found really interesting, there was this one instance where they spoke about parent-child relations, and they said that, if you're in a romantic relationship, it's easy to cut people off and cut people out of your life because your connection is can be compared to like a piece of red string, and you just have a pair of scissors and you can snip it away. But when it comes to a parent-child relationship, the connection is like thick metal chains, and all you're given, it's the same thing, it's just a pair of scissors. So severing that tie can be so difficult. The book didn't delve too deeply into this, even though I would have loved for it to talk about how Alfred Adler would address problems like that. The book did say that if you do have a situation like that between a parent and a child, the best thing to do would be not to ignore it but face it head on. See what happens from there. If it has to be severed, it's going to be really difficult, but it's going to happen. But don't shy away from it, face it head on, and I would definitely agree with that. Okay, then it spoke about rewards and punishment education, which was so interesting. And I had never thought about this before, but it's a really profound way of viewing the education system and just teaching anything to someone in general, because the book said that when parents are teaching their kids or when kids are being taught in school, they are taught with reward and punishment as, a way to encourage good behavior and then discourage bad behavior. But what it does, when you really look at the bigger picture, is it doesn't incentivize people to do good things if they're not being rewarded, which is problematic if you think about it. And I think you can see this like in a lot of adults where they're not going to do good things for other people because when once you grow up, it's not like everyone's praising you. It's not like you're gonna get grades. Like there's no reward for good behavior, and so that concept just like doesn't exist in the real world. So what the philosopher explains to the youth instead is pretty interesting, because he says you can actually just make people feel like you are grateful to have them in your life and you're grateful for what they are doing for you. And that would just mean thanking them and showing your gratitude in whatever ways you can when they do something good. In that way, I think it'll substitute the reward for the feeling of being of use to someone. And the book talks a lot about this feeling of being of use to people, because it says it's one of the things that humans um, need to be happy in a community, and just to feel like it's okay to be here and to feel welcomed and feel safe and feel like, yeah, like they're of use, like they're doing something for someone. So the book says that instead of saying, oh, good boy, like good girl, you did this or you did that, instead you just say, thank you so much for doing that. Like that really helped me in this way. Another thing the book talks about is horizontal and vertical relationships, which relates to punishment and reward, because when you're punishing someone or rewarding someone, you're doing it in a vertical relationship where one person's on top, so they're better, and the other person's below, so they're not as good. And the person who's not as good is being praised or is being chided for like doing something wrong. Whereas if you're in a horizontal relationship, which is like this, and both of the two people are just like on one level, you don't need to praise anyone or punish anyone. You just have to say thank you, and you just have to treat them as equals and make them feel like they are of use to you and they help you and they are beneficial and valuable to you, and they will give you back that same treatment. And the book says that is so much more valuable than just being praised, so that you keep doing good things. The book also talks about the separation of tasks, which I've learned to implement in my life since reading the book, and it's been so great because it just makes you realize that whatever's outside your sphere of control doesn't matter. Like if I want something done and I ask someone to do it and then they don't do it, I just need to sit back and relax and be like, okay, well, I asked them to do it. And in me asking them, I did whatever was in my sphere of control. But them not doing it or doing it was outside my sphere of control. And if they didn't do it, I just have to move on and accept that and learn from it and just maybe take matters into my own hands next time, or like find a solution for it that is within my sphere of control, because in that way you're respecting the way the other person is. Like you're understanding that they're on their own journey and you cannot change them. Like who do you think you are? You're not going to be able to change them. You should just be able to love and accept them and let it be the way it is. Okay, the next interesting thing that the book spoke about was freedom. So the book said that most people have a desire for recognition, and you want to be seen, you want to be appreciated by people. You want to be praised. I think it relates to like the way in which we're raised, and because of that, I think people have this need to be recognized by others. And the book says if you have a need to be recognized, you're always going to be doing the things that other people like, and you're always going to be pursuing things that will give you recognition by other people. And in doing that, aren't you just going to be living life according to them? Because they might not be into the same things as you, and they might only give you that recognition if you do what they find valuable. But will you really be living authentically and happily if you do that? And then the book takes it one step further and says that if you are willing to be disliked by people, that in a way ensures that you are going to be happy. Because when you are being disliked by someone, isn't that in a way confirmation that you are living according to what you want to do, and you're living according to what you find value in and what makes you happy? Which I think is a really powerful thought. And there we have it, the name of the book, The Courage to be Disliked. So the whole idea is that, see, you have to be disliked to be free. And you're only going to be happy when you're free and you're doing what you want. So just make peace with being disliked. Because until and unless you have the courage to be disliked, you're always going to be living life by someone else's rules. and that isn't going to keep you happy. Another very nice quote, I would say, that's in the book is you are the protagonist of your life, but not the protagonist of the world. And I think that's so powerful because it really puts things into perspective where, yes, you're like the main character in your life, but you're not the main character of everyone's life, and that's okay because you are the main character of your life, and that's what matters. Okay, the other really powerful idea that I noticed was this concept about the level of being, where they say that you need to have self acceptance on the path of being happy. And to have self acceptance, you need to feel like it's okay to be here, that you are good as you are. Just your plain level of existence has inherent value. You need to accept that to then cultivate happiness, or like be on that journey to cultivate happiness. And I think basically what they're talking about is having self worth, which is so important. I think I am also trying to cultivate that, and with the hustle and bustle and the rat race that everyone's in today, I think a lot of people forget to just cultivate self-worth. They sort of get trapped in this mindset where it's like, I need to be working, or I need to be making money, or I need to be bringing some sort of materialistic value to someone in order to be of value myself and like to have worth. And the book says that you do have worth just by existing, because the people who love you need you to be there. Maybe you have a child. The child really needs you to be there. Maybe you have a friend. The friend really needs you to be there. You're a valuable part of their life and they love you. Like your parents need you to be there. Your cat needs you to be there because your cat loves you. You take care of your cat. Your dog needs you to be there. So the book says that you need to understand that you have value just in your existence. Because imagine like suddenly taking away your existence, it would hurt a lot of people and it would cause pain to a lot of people. So doesn't that mean that just by existing you are contributing to someone's happiness and to like adding some sort of benefit to someone's life, which I think is such a beautiful way of thinking. Another point was the courage to be normal, which I think is such an interesting concept because the way it was introduced in the book was that if you see a kid and that kid's acting up big time, like creating a lot of situations where there's problematic behavior being displayed, the kid is looking for attention. And this can be connected back to that whole idea of praise and punishment, where, praise and punishment are both ways of giving attention to a child. So if you're praising them, you are giving them attention. And if you're punishing them, you are also giving them attention. And sometimes what kids do is they just want attention from their parents and they might feel neglected, or they want attention from their parents, and they start off maybe getting it the right way by doing really well at school, and the parents will be like, oh my god, you're so smart and we're so proud of you for getting good grades. But eventually that praise stops coming in. Maybe it becomes a normal thing and that praise stops coming in and the kid is like, wait, why I'm not getting attention anymore? So let me just do something really bad. Let me go to the other end of the spectrum and do something bad that will require punishment. And that way I can keep getting attention. So they'll do bad things and they'll get punished over and over again. And the parents will get tired of the fact that even though they're punishing the child, there's no improvement in the child's behavior. And the book says this is because you are giving the child what it wants. It just wants attention. It doesn't really matter to the child at this point if that attention is in the form of praise or punishment. Another thing that the book mentioned was about imposed linear lines. And it said that a lot of adults have this tendency to tell young people about what life should look like. And in doing that, they impose these linear lives on people who are maybe starting their 20s, or um, teenagers who are just starting to figure out what they want to do and figure out their life and who they are in the world and all of that stuff. So the idea behind this in the minds of the adults is that what makes up a happy life is the conventional one, where there's one linear path that you have to follow: go to the good university, get the good grades, do the good job, have a family and then like check off all the boxes. But the philosopher says that this is actually not what life is about. Life is not like a linear line, and instead it's a series of dots where each dot is just a moment and you're living moment to moment, and that is the beauty of life. This idea can be explained further in my last point where the book talks about kinesis and inertia. Inertia is a kind of movement in which what is now forming is what has been formed. And kinesis is a type of movement that has a starting point and an end point. The movement from starting to end is optimal if it is carried out as efficiently and as quickly as possible. Looking at life as a series of dots versus looking at it as just one line and trying to get to the end goal and the end point as soon as possible in the most efficient way. The philosopher contrasts that way of thinking that most people have, that most adults have, and they will try to make you believe in it. Don't believe it. Please, for me, don't believe it. What's trying to be said is that the moment in which you are now is everything, right? Because what you have in your hand right now is the moment, is the current moment, and it's the moment that's being formed. And I think that's really beautiful. I think that's a lovely way of thinking about life. I don't think it means you shouldn't plan out anything in your life ever. I think it just means you need to live in the moment more, and you need to realize that it's not about the destination, it's about what you are creating right now in your life. What are you doing right now as we speak, in this moment, in this second? Because what do you have other than that? I think more people should give importance to that and stop looking at life in such a linear way, because I wouldn't be here if I saw life as a very linear thing, and I'm actually really happy that I'm here. So I feel like I am, part of the proof of the fact that that way of thinking makes sense and has a lot of potential in terms of how much happiness it can bring to people. That was the end of everything I had to say about The Courage to Be Disliked. I loved the book so much. This was the first book that I finished in 2024, and I'm hoping to do more book reviews. I think it's really fun, and I'm gonna try to keep doing it. And thank you for watching. Okay, but just before I go, I want to show the camera like how beautiful the place that I'm sitting in is. Isn't it the prettiest? I'm so glad I came here. I was a little scared about it. I was like, should I just like go alone to this park and sit um and film myself? But it's actually pretty chill. No one's like bothering me, and it's great. It's really pretty, and thank you for watching.